Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Sen Nutrition Podcast with your hosts Bryan and Peter today. And today's topic is reasons to avoid adding iron to your horse's diet. How are you, Peter?
Bryan, very well. It's a bit overcast today. The gin and tonic are in the fridge, so this afternoon's going to be great, even better.
We've got a big day because it was our human collagen release today.
Yeah, we've got a few sales already and a bit of feedback as well. So everyone's that has tried it has had really good results as well. So we're very proud and hopefully the word will spread and we will do a podcast on a collagen as well.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. And going on a totally different wavelength here, we're talking about iron and your horse's diets. And this is very controversial. It's controversial in a way that Peter and I see this in the industry. Even 8 years ago, 9 years ago, it was rife that horse trainers especially were supplementing iron on top of their already heavy iron diets. And what we have done in those 8-9 years at Sen is trying to decrease the level of iron in every horse's diet with great results. And what we'll go through today is why are we doing this? How much iron is naturally occurring in a horse's diet? Look at the signs and symptoms, but also look at what damage is happening inside your horse if you are exposing him to high levels of iron each day and what potentially could go wrong in that sense. And is it affecting performance? Yes.
Bryan, over the sort of 8-9 years that we've obviously had the business, I don't think we've come across one horse that's actually been anemic.
Yeah, well, being a scientist, I have seen on the human side what anemia or an anemic profile looks in blood. I've looked at hundreds of horse, if not thousands of horse blood tests, and very rarely do you have a profile of a true anemia or blood loss.
So based on that fact, then, why are people adding extra iron supplements, whether, it's an injectable or whether it's a powdered iron? I think a lot of people don't know, obviously, that iron is very easy to get and it's sort of rife in hays and pastures around Australia. So maybe it will open up a few sort of, a few minds and a few eyes to our listeners that it's very easy to get your recommended daily iron intake from pretty much basic nutrition. And if you are supplementing iron on top of that, as Bryan mentioned, you are hindering performance and obviously possibly the health of your horse as well.
Yeah, 100% agree, Peter. So what is the actual daily intake recommended for a horse for iron? So the NRC, the National Research Council, has established a range around 400 to 500 milligrams per 500 kg body weight of horse per day. So a horse can get this from forage alone.
Well, Bryan, look, we've seen probably hundreds, if not sort of thousands of different hay tests, sort of pasture analysis. And I've seen them as high as 2,000 milligrams per kilo to as low as 100 milligrams per kilo. So as an example, let's just say the kilo of Rhodes grass hay has 200 milligrams of iron. So from what you're saying, if they eat 2 kilos to 3 kilos of Rhodes grass hay at 200 milligrams of iron, they're going to hit their daily requirement.
Easily, without any further supplementation. And that's including that hard feed. It's quite scary. So even looking at a lactating mare, 625 milligrams per day, you're easily going to hit that.
Well, most horses are eating, 3 to 4, possibly 5 biscuits of hay. And if we do it into a kilo, right, one biscuit, say 2 kilo, 4 or 5 biscuits, 8 to 9 kilos. I mean, they'll be getting in excess of 1,000 milligrams quite easily. And that's at the lower end of the hay analysis at 200 milligrams.
Yeah. And what we want to touch on today is what has Sen done to improve that hard feed profile so we're not over supplementing iron in the diet. So we've established that your roughage or your pasture or hay has enough iron to cover its needs per day. So what our main aim now is to not supplement anything more. And one of the main reasons for this is a horse cannot effectively excrete iron from their body. So there's no actual mechanism if they're supplied high levels of iron to get rid of it. And once in circulation, it is removed by the liver and spleen and is stored throughout the body of the horse. And later on in the podcast, we'll go through the effect of this storage. So looking at the profiles of our hard feed, Peter, the Sen Grain Free and the Sen CF50 have no added iron. And our listeners, if you are feeding a supplement or a hard feed, be sure to check these levels per kg if you want to lower that iron level. And Peter will go through the exact values compared to other common feed types.
Yeah, so that's very well said, Brian. So basically, we don't add any added iron into our feed. So whatever iron we have comes naturally from the raw ingredients, and that's basically the best absorbable iron that you can get, which comes from natural ingredients. As a comparison, we average in the lupin pellet around about 150 milligrams of iron. The grain-free is about 125, so they're very, very sort of, on the lower end. Compared to that, beet pulp, which is very popular in Australia, you're looking at 752 milligrams of iron per 1 kilogram of feed. And people might think, oh, look, I'm only using a handful as a carrier for a powder. You don't need the 752 milligrams of iron. So there are other options out there which you can use as the carrier. If you are unlucky to be in an area of Australia where you might have the 1,000 milligrams of iron in your pasture, or your 1,500 or 2,000 milligrams, you're way over. So that's, feeding beet pulp on top of a high iron pasture, you're just asking for trouble. What are we? Copra is about 220 milligrams, so it's not too bad. The rice bran about 75, and the soya hulls as well, they're almost at 700 milligrams. So very high compared to ours. It's almost 6 to 7 times higher iron to what we have in our pelleted products. So I think the moral of the story is, please look at the levels of your overall diet. So if you have got a pasture analysis, even better. If you don't, just please assume you've got at least 200. I've never seen a pasture or a hay analysis below sort of 200. So if you work off 200, they're eating X amount of kilos per day, whether it's hay or pasture, and then try to balance out probably a product that's high in zinc and copper to help with the excretion. And Bryan will go over that shortly as well.
Yeah, that's really good points, Peter, especially those trace minerals. The zinc and copper, they really compete for that absorption and utilization in the horse, and they're used for many pathways in the horse. And if you overdo the iron, so you got less absorption of those trace minerals, you're not going to promote that overall health in many of their body systems. So if you do suspect iron overload in your horse, there are some common signs that might point you to this. So you've got, obviously, and this is really general, so poor coat condition, hoof problems, raised liver enzymes, intolerance to sugars, also Cushing's disease or allergies and immune issues. And this, I think half of these stem from that inability of the other trace minerals to get a chance of absorption in the horse.
Brian, and I think there's also a difference between the added iron, which obviously is not natural to the product as well. Do you just want to go briefly and explain the difference between the iron and the raw ingredients, and when iron is added in terms of a supplement iron as well into the feed or a supplement?
Yeah, in a nutshell, it's just not natural. So it's not naturally occurring in that feed, whether it is synthetic or a natural iron form. You're still adding another source on top, which can put the horse at risk of iron overload.
And that's where I think the zinc and copper obviously is really important to have in the overall diet. That's, we want higher zinc and copper than what we do to iron. Yeah, is that correct?
Yeah, and a very good quality one like what is in sen, so chelated, attached to a protein, that means, and that's better absorption.
Bryan, should we start going with some of the points just to give our listeners an idea of what reasons and sort of points they can take on board to avoid having a horse that might be overdosing on iron, or to avoid even happening altogether?
Yeah, so the points that we really want to stress is, and for the title of this podcast, the reasons why you want to minimize further iron supplementation are potentially these conditions that can arise. So unfortunately, when iron is in the body of a horse or in excess, iron acts as an oxidant. So this increases oxidative stress and inflammation in the body. So when you look at iron, it's a pro-oxidant which produces free radicals, which in turn can potentially cause tissue damage and inflammation. So to counteract this, vitamin E and vitamin C, these antioxidants are very good in the diet to help counteract these effects of the high iron. But what we are trying to do at Sen is promote that lower level of ingestion, so then these other antioxidants can be used in recovery rather than trying to combat the iron that's circulating.
Well, we have got very high copper and zinc in both the CF50 and the grain-free product, and they are in an organic form as well. We do have vitamin E at a pretty high level, and also we got vitamin C as well. So we do tick those 4 boxes, which obviously help with the excretion, obviously, and any absorption of iron, and minimize the overload or the storage as well.
Yeah, you would say that we have developed all our nutrient profiles around our conditions in Australia being high in iron. So we've recognized this. I think, Peter, when we first entered this industry, no one was recognizing this, or it was very seldomly put in pockets. So there were nutritionists that knew it, but there weren't products that were out there available.
I think in the early days, I think we got hit over the head sort of pretty hard with different sort of performance trainers about having low iron in our feed. And look, a lot of them were and possibly could still be sort of supplementing iron, whether it's in an injectable form or whether it's in a powdered supplement on top. And sometimes those habits don't change, but the research is showing, and it's very clear research, that it's very easy to hit the iron level even for performance horses through your pasture. So like, why in the world would you want to be supplementing iron on top of your pasture when you can easily hit it with 1 or 2 biscuits of hay? It's to me, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's one of those old adages that they think it's a performance boost. I'm not sure why, because when you have sufficient amounts of blood in circulation, the horse also contracts its spleen to push more blood into circulation. So that's like their natural blood boost that's happening inside. And putting iron, or thinking iron is going to build more blood when a horse is capable of doing it at the times of stress, is just crazy. And we're trying to bring this into exposure or into light. And many trainers are beginning to notice this, that you do not need to inject, especially those injectables with all these iron complexes. It's just wasting money, but also it could be slowing your horse down or hindering their performance, because when it is deposited around the body, as we touched on before, those free radicals, you need to combat the damage it's having on there, as well as the other negative trace mineral interactions.
Well, as the saying goes, there can be too much of a good thing. And as you said, too much iron does hinder performance. And yourself and obviously myself have worked with numerous trainers, and as an example, any that have been supplementing additional iron, all we've done is we just said, look, based on your pasture, based on your feed, based on a supplemental iron, let's just cut the iron altogether. Let's get some zinc and copper in through the grain-free, or the CF50. And funny enough, the performance has improved, because what we've done is we've taken the iron handbrake off that horse, and it's not like a well where you keep putting water in and it just gets higher and higher and higher, and then you get faster and faster and faster. As Bryan said, it doesn't work that way. You hit a limit, and then that's the limit. And once you go over that limit, it's it affects performance. It could get dangerous. So by getting the zinc and copper in and balancing out that iron, you will actually improve performance, because you're not redlining the iron where you should have it pretty much at the top, not over the top.
Yeah, that's well said, Peter. It's that overall health we're trying to promote through lowering that overall iron intake when we have to feed the hard feed for its overall nutrient support of that performance horse. So looking at other potential issues that can arise from overexposure to iron, insulin resistance has, although it's not been clear, the mechanism, high levels of iron have been linked to equine metabolic syndrome, and more research needs to be looked into this, but there has been correlations seen in other animals, including humans. So as years go on in the progression, let's see if that iron level has that impact on that syndrome, but also other conditions such as laminitis. So elevated iron intake may cause laminitis and other hoof problems. And this could be related to that insulin resistance, but also that poor absorption of other minerals, which are really important to hoof health. So it's one body system that heavily relies on trace minerals, and by overdoing the iron, you're shortcutting the absorption of those vital minerals.
Yeah, that's well summarised, Bryan. And as the example I gave previously, so if we work off, say, 5 kilograms of dry matter, provides 1,000 milligrams of iron, we're already at double. And then even if you give a kilogram of your beet pulp, that's a 750. We're way overs just with that alone. And then some people are feeding 3 or 4 different hard feeds. Imagine then supplementing a iron supplement on top of those two things. I mean, you'll be 10, 20 times, over where you need to be. And, we sort of laugh at it, but it's not really a laughing matter, is it?
It's not. And when you look at the effect it can have inside the horse's body due to them unable to excrete it, you just want to try and know with the iron profile of your diet and then make adjustments where you can. Because another interesting thing is, when we have researched this topic over the years, Peter, is you can't actually measure iron in Australia in a blood test.
That's well said, Bryan. And people think that you can, but there's only one university in America, the Kansas State University, which can actually measure the iron. Is it in the ferritin or is it in the cells?
Yeah, so the ferritin is the storage form, but looking at the assay they use to test it in Australia, it's not to the profile of iron within the horse's body. So in a nutshell, it's not accurate. It's an indication of the level, and I think it's actually not accurate.
And I think you've pinged a vet there where I think one of our performance trainers, I think we got sent an iron level, and I can't remember whether it was high or low, but I think Bryan looked into it and said, well, in Australia, we can't actually test it.
No. And the result was actually not meaningful because they look at other parameters to try and see if there's any low iron, and that includes the hemoglobin, and that was normal. So there was no correlation. The lab that I did talk to that was in Sydney, they said, yeah, we don't base this off an iron deficiency due to diet. There's no correlation. But as Peter and I see, a lot of the blood interpretations are trying to be related to nutrient profiles where you cannot simply have it that simple. There's many factors that go on when you look at a blood test and looking at profiles and symptom pictures. And it's not just one test saying, oh, you've got low intake of one thing here. All the horses are different, and there's many reasons it could be.
It's pretty scary. I'm just thinking about it. Like, if there's no test in Australia to test high iron, it's pretty much like we're flying blind, yeah?
Yeah, we are. And that makes it even more important that we look at our horses' diets, look at the iron levels that they're ingesting, and try and get them as low as possible.
On the high side, Bryan, if it's sort of 10, 20 sort of times above where it needs to be, iron can be very corrosive, and signs may include gastric irritation, gastric pain, gastric ulceration, as well as damage to the small and large intestinal lining. Other signs associated with iron toxicity include diarrhea, dehydration, depression, and reduced immunity. There's also an increased risk of bacterial infections as the bacteria use iron as an energy source. Like that's in a very severe sort of circumstances, but we need to be aware that it's very easy to hit those iron levels. And if you just keep doing it day over day and then add more and more, as the horse gets older as well over time, you could run into some issues.
Yeah, it's the riskier way to feed. We're not saying it's going to develop these issues in a year, 5 years, but what we do know is what is happening inside the horse's body and that potential risk that may cause. So,
Bryan, to our performance horse trainers, can you maybe briefly just explain why iron does not boost red blood cell numbers?
Yeah, so what you need to do to provide the nutrients for red blood cell synthesis is not just iron. There's many other trace minerals, there's many other elements that make that red blood cell. And when a horse already has sufficient amounts of iron to make the blood, it's not that extra iron supplement that's going to make it. It's actually going to be more detrimental to the horse. What you want to do is promote better training, a more even nutrient profile, but also the horse in very good health will make its own blood in a sufficient manner when every body system is in its best condition.
Yeah, it's like, not training your horse, feeding it a really poor diet and then supplementing iron and thinking that it's going to perform really well.
Yeah, correct. Performance or training will stimulate that blood cell synthesis, or the horse will make the blood in response to the good proper training, but also the good nutrient intake without that iron overload.
Bryan, also iron interferes with the absorption of other minerals. Supplemental iron can decrease zinc and copper uptake from the diet, and over time it can lead to a deficiency with some major health problems. So zinc and copper are very low in Australian pastures. As we said, iron is very high. With hay, obviously, once it's been dried out, the zinc and copper can be even less than what it is in a pasture. So this is why we've taken the initiative at the early stages of our business to really, really go high into zinc and copper. And I believe we've got the highest zinc and copper in our pellets to 20 feet in Australia.
Yeah, our hard feed per kg, when you put it comparatively with the other so-called complete feeds, we do have high levels. They are chelated, so they are the better organic type. So what Peter and I see throughout our trainer clients and all our clients for that matter is we have that really good trace mineral profile, and that reflects in that overall health of the horse.
Well, look, if we skid our listeners and you're onto your second bottle of Chardonnay or a champagne and you're going, geez, this sounds like, my horse. Even if it's not our product, look at adding a high zinc, a high copper, obviously with vitamin E and vitamin C supplement into the diet just to correct the balance that the high iron is causing. So I think people in Australia, maybe more so here than maybe overseas, they don't put as much emphasis on the vitamin mineral profile / supplements. It's like, well, we'll feed it the hard feed. Everything should be in the hard feed, but everything's not in the hard feed. And unless you're feeding the recommended amount of that hard feed, which might be 3, 4, 5, 6 kilograms, which some people are feeding, and if that feed's got 500 milligrams of iron at 5 or 6 kilograms, you're almost sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul, because you're trying to give a feed that's got high zinc and copper, but then if the iron is 2 or 3 times higher, you're making a problem even worse.
Yeah, 100%, Peter. Touching back on the copper and zinc, they are really important for coat colour. The zinc more so for the darker ones. The copper is more important for the chestnuts, and that really is one of the first indications that you may have issues with iron intake. But generally, when you look at a horse and they're dull, there could be a range of factors going on there, and iron could just be one.
Also, Bryan, with the zinc you mentioned, very important. Also for immunity health, obviously, with with all the COVID that's been around, like we've been taking zinc supplements here and vitamin D like it's going out of fashion, and we've sort of survived very well. So it's the same for your horse. Don't go shortchanging on the zinc. Don't just use the zinc oxide. Use an organic form, like the one that we do, because we know it's 5 or 6 times more expensive, but it actually works. So in my opinion, one mineral you don't want to shortchange is probably zinc and copper.
Yeah, we 100% echo that throughout all animal health and human health, and it's just nice that it's being recognised in this current climate that it will help everyone's immune system, and just ensuring it in your diet, it's just going to help provide the pathways for the immune system to function properly.
Yeah, and look, if people are still confused, I think it's very wise. Maybe you look at our free diet analysis. Obviously, Carly's fantastic. She's all over it. Has done thousands of sort of diet analysis for us. So beautiful thing with Carly is she can look at your whole diet. She can go through each individual aspect of the diet, from your pasture to your hay to your hard feed, what else you might be feeding, and just balance up not just that iron, but also the correct zinc and copper. You might have, too much sugar and starch in a diet. You might be feeding something that's causing symptoms. You might have too much protein, which basically is making your horse urinate, and the urine might be getting violet color, which might be verging on some sort of kidney issues, which then obviously goes into dehydration. So it can be like a web that's just, it's very hard to untangle. But horses will show you symptoms when things are not right. So rather than just reaching out then for the supplement to treat that symptom, cut it right back and just go, all right, let's just do a complete reset. Let's look at the diet. Let's see if it's balanced. And more times than not, when you balance your diet, all those symptoms are, should in time obviously go away. And you won't need to feed all the supplements then. And, it might be costing us business, but we're not in the business of just, making supplements to treat symptoms. We're here to sell a complete diet. Some people obviously, can't feed the whole diet, whether it's products they can't get or they choose not to. Then obviously the supplements, are for that reason, just to obviously maintain the health of that horse to some degree. But I can't stress more about getting your diet balanced and looked at. And look, I think it's a great time, obviously coming into the winter time, not too long as well.
Yeah, and that whole feed program, that the Sen way of feeding is there for the horse. There's a reason why we feed each element. Each body system requires good nutrition profiles that we have seen that really is adapted to the Australian conditions. And when we do get phone calls of a customer wanting to lower their iron content because they've done all their research in the diet, they may just use one Sen product like the Sen Lupin pellet in place of the beet that they were feeding. And then it's been countless times. A month later, we get the same phone call from the customer, and they said the horse has gone to another level. I can really see that impact of having a lower iron level when I know I was feeding too much iron before.
Yeah, they've corrected that handbrake, obviously, that was causing that particular symptom. And look, some of these horses might have one handbrake, others might have 10 handbrakes. So it really depends on horses, individuals, as we always say. So I think balancing the diet, you've got more chance of getting those handbrakes off, a lot more sooner than if you just sort of play with this or with that. And, there's nothing worse than guessing or spending, 6 hours on Google, trying to get different opinions from different people, where I think if you get someone like Carly, obviously she's a qualified nutritionist, to analyze your diet, you're not flying blind. You're going to be put on the right track. And, at least you know that you've done everything for that particular horse. And most times I'm not. The budget's going to be a lot better than if you're feeding 3 or 4 different hard feeds and 3 or 4 different supplements.
Yeah, 100%, Peter. I'll put the link to that diet analysis in the show notes, and I think we've covered it all. I thought this was going to go for ages.
Well, look, hopefully people haven't sort of, been scared. And look, I'll give sort of like a prime example in terms of human health. It's like us, eating like junk food, KFC, pizza every day, and then taking a multivitamin and washing it down with, Diet Coke. You got to get your foundation right. There's nothing wrong with the junk food and Coke on a Saturday and Sunday, but that's 2 days out of the 7. On the 5 days, we'd be really good, and then on the 2 days we can blow out. The difference is with your horse, obviously they got to eat every single day. The trickle feeders, we can't afford to feed a high diet, high in iron, whether it's high in carbohydrates as well. We have to try to limit that. And with young horses, you might go, well, my horse is fine. I've been feeding this for 4 or 5 years, and it's bulletproof. But then you get to 1 year where all that, all that time that it's had to accumulate comes to fruition, and then you get these big symptoms, and it's going to cost you a lot more than to treat that symptom when it's got to the end stage, where actually you could have prevented that over the years by feeding a balanced diet.
Just like a human teenager, absolutely bulletproof.
We were at one stage, weren't we, Bryan?
Now we have to really look at what we eat
or
and
drink,
exercise, and drink. And speaking of that, I think we will wrap that up.
Yeah, Bryan, it's now this has been really, really enlightening podcast. We've done a lot of research into it, and it's good because I think it's overdue. All right, Bryan, I think that wraps it for today. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think everyone can reach us on those usual channels. The Sen Users Group is really informative, and it's really nice to see everyone's success on Sen, and they get a chance to show it off. And also tagging us on Instagram, you get that 15 seconds of fame to our many thousand fans, and you can really get that exposure as well, and show other people your Sen success. So,
and as we mentioned, we have launched the Sen Collagen today. And look, just to give people just a quick update. A lot of us are deficient in collagen because we're not eating from nose to tail like we used to. 50, 100 years ago, we don't have the tripes. We don't have the chicken skins. We don't have all those organ meats that taste foul. So we do stop producing collagen at a 1% rate for, I think it's over 20 or 25. 20, so it's odorless, it's tasteless. You can mix it with your tea and coffee, and highly recommend that our horse clients even look at it for themselves as well.
Yeah, it's for the rider, for the trainer, and for you. So after you've got your horse's diet right, you can have a look at your own one. And this is where we're having that great crossover where we know the theory, or we know the nutrient profiles of deficiency in humans. We want to try and stay the most natural way possible in our diet, and with the ease of convenience, because it is a minefield out there with the range. And yeah, we're here to really help everyone, the horse and the owner.
One-stop shop, Bryan.
Well, I think we're doing something right being here 9 years later.
Yeah, and we are looking younger, thanks to the collagen as well. I mean, like my wrinkles haven't shown yet, so I'll keep taking 4 kilograms a day and hope it continues to work.
Yeah, no, it's a very good product, and yeah, you'll be hearing more about it in coming podcasts. So thanks everyone for listening again, and yeah, Peter and I will have another podcast to you very soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.